All right, guys, welcome. It is another Hot Topic Tuesday. You guys get this for the very first time. So I'm hanging out in Macomb at Century 21 AAA North with a bunch of lovely ladies and Scott. Um, anyway, obviously, what's the big news going on today? Not so much affecting you guys here in Macomb, although it will, right? But for all of you guys who are part of Realcomp, what's the big news? What's going on? Effective this evening, what's disappearing? The compensation, the ability to advertise the offer of compensation to the buyer broker. It will disappear sometime this evening, and everybody in Realcomp tomorrow morning will wake up with none of that in the MLS any longer. How does that affect, so like you guys here, those that are part of MI Real Source, how is that going to affect you tomorrow? Well, what you should see on Realcomp listings when it comes to the SABANA is a big zero, okay? How it will impact you for the Realcomp agents is, as Realcomp agents, you'll wake up tomorrow, and if you look at any MI Real Source listings, you will not see anything. It just won't show, because in Realcomp, those fields are now going to be gone when you wake up tomorrow morning sometime, because they just said on the evening of the 16th, okay? So we want to go back and then take a look at, well, how is that impacting us? Some of you, if you were with me Friday, we're going to have some repeat, but I want to bring it back, because here's one of the key things, the KISS principle. So everybody remembers the KISS principle here, right? Keep it simple. I like silly. Salesperson. Okay, we'll keep it politically correct, and nobody hates us that way. So keep it simple, salesperson. Let's take a look and go, what's actually happening as of tomorrow morning? Get this to advance for me. If it's really the aspect of it's created confusion. As a matter of fact, it's really fear unchecked, panic, and yes, not all of you, but there's some that have had an absolute panic, and of course, paralysis. Even beginning at the first of the year, there was a whole lot of people who did nothing because they were paralyzed from the aspect of the fear. Even the aspect of, well, I'll get in and I'll dig into this, and it's the analysis from, or paralysis from analysis. What we did is we did nothing. So here's the simplistic part to everything. It's the KISS principle. Number one, this evening, it's starting here. By the way, I think even for those MI Real Source, other MLSs, I would say anticipate that it will transition over before August 17th. Okay. As a matter of fact, let me address for those who haven't heard. Why did Realcomp do this to us? Well, they didn't know what the date was going to be, but because if you think about it, the staff at Realcomp doesn't make these changes. Realcomp instructs vendors who provide all the software, and she deals with 4 to 5 of them. They pretty much dictated, here's your date. It's going to hit this date. And you notice that even they brought out that it's 2 separate dates for a couple of different things, not important for what we need to work with today, okay? So what's changing? This is what the settlement does. It says you can no longer advertise through the MLS in any way what your offer of compensation is to the buyer broker. Okay, there's a simplistic part. That's all it's done. There's not a workaround it. So you can't put it in the comments. You can't post it in the docs with the disclosures. It cannot in any way be in the MLS. As a matter of fact, let's clarify one other thing. If you're a big entrepreneur, you cannot create a website for everybody to go and post all of their offers of compensation into it. Neither can anybody else, because if we participated in that, we're no longer covered under the protection from the agreement in this settlement. Bottom line is, we got to do what we got to do, okay? So here's the other part. Now, notice that I have also put it in quotes. So this is important to understand the agreement. It says that a realtor must have a signed agreement. Okay? Signed agreement. Now, I want you to know that because I don't want you going out and trying to educate the consumer and saying that you must sign a buyer representation contract. Or worse yet, is going out and telling the consumer that you have to sign an exclusive buyer representation contract. It doesn't say that. Signed agreement is the specific words in the settlement. Now, let me hit one other part with that. I hear many people saying the law. Guys, this is not law. I clarified with the North Oakland County Board of Realtor president yesterday, who happens to be an attorney. I said, just let me clarify because I think it's important as realtors, we actually educate the consumer correctly. This is not a law. Do I foresee it going in that direction? Yeah, but this is a settlement. This is an agreement under the way that we as realtors will operate. It's an agreement, okay? Not law yet. So I don't think we should be using that word. So it's a signed agreement. We must have a signed agreement prior to touring homes. Okay? What does that mean? Doing what you do. If we're out showing a home, we're touring a home. Providing information. Doing what we do as realtors. And it says, while working with a buyer. Okay? So, signed agreement prior to touring homes while working with a buyer. There you go. As long as you understand those two things, everything else is easy. I'm looking around the room here, guys. I should be looking out here and seeing what you guys are doing too, but we've got to keep it that simple. Now, what does that mean? Let's take a look at it a little bit further. Originally, the effective date was August 17th. We know all the MLSs are planning to do that beforehand because this was a drop dead date. Most of us, including myself, was preparing as if that was a drop dead date, not thinking about, well, it could happen before. It's happened before, and it will probably happen with all of them. MLSs, this is an important part because you're going, well, who's even going to police this to know that we're actually doing things under the agreement? The MLS. They're the judge, the jury, the police. They will determine who's guilty and how much you're going to pay. It's the MLS. That's their job. That's what they've been assigned to. Okay. Here's the word, concessions. So a change, and now we know, I believe all of the MLSs that our company participates and works with will put concession amounts into the MLS. So here's I can tell you that Realcomp was very hesitant in doing this, but they've agreed to do it because apparently all other MLSs were doing it. They're putting concessions in. What do I believe is going to happen? My seller is going to agree to pay, we'll say, and by the way, today, guys, I'm going to use 3% as the example because we're all one company. So we're not price fixing. We're all one company. We can do this. So 3%. Seller's going to offer 3% so that we can offer compensation to the buyer's broker. Where are you going to put it? In this blank called concessions. Okay? Right? Now, here's the only thing. It cannot be earmarked specifically for buyer broker compensation. But what do you know? Sellers built in 3% to be able to help the buyer out. Now, where that goes, up to the buyer. But what we cannot use is concessions as part of or being earmarked toward buyer broker fee. I'll share with you what I believe will happen. The simplest and easiest, and maybe as we talk today, you're just going to have the buyer build it into their purchase agreement. We'll cover that in a moment. So This is an old presentation I put together. So will the MLS do this? The answer is yes. Will they put the amount in? Yes. Either a dollar amount or a percentage is what you will see as opportunities to be able to do that. Currently, we know all of that. We got that. Let me throw one other thing out then in regards to how can we find out, because this becomes a question. If it's no longer advertised, how do we find out what they offer? Hello, you offering? I mean, we've got to keep it simple because that's, now, we know that there's also companies that have created websites that as long as you save their websites, you can go to those websites and put in an address and it'll tell you what that seller, the listing broker, is able to offer as compensation. Okay? Here's the other part that we know. Because again, here's two simple changes, but look at what it's created. So now, before we were always guaranteed our compensation through the MLS. Now, everybody, if you didn't know it, that's why you always got paid. It's because a listing broker put it in the MLS. The MLS, you had an agreement, you posted it, you pay that to whoever brought that. Okay? That was our guarantee of payment. Well, if it's no longer posted, there's no longer guarantee of payment. Even if they're still offering, where's the guarantee? Where is it in writing that you're going to get that compensation? Where's the, you call me, and let's say I'm one of those unethical people. I say, yeah, I got 3% in it. You never send me anything. There's no agreement outside of what I just told you over the phone. You need compensated for sure, guaranteed. So we have tools in place to be able to take care of that. We're going to, if our well, let's shift gears a second, stay on that, but shift gears. Where or who has always compensated us? Okay. Now I'll put it out here. I should have done a poll or something for this one. That would have been fun. How many of you say the seller, and we'll show hands in here, you guys just put it out there. How many of you believe that the seller paid the buyer's broker compensation? How many of you thought the buyer paid the buyer's broker compensation? Whose arms aren't working? So if you've been with me before, guys, it's always been the listing broker. And I almost should have started with this first, shouldn't I? Because I kind of gave you that little bit of an understanding. So here's some verbal judo, okay? Some verbal judo. And Kevin, I see you got a hand up there. I'll come to you in a second. Some verbal judo. Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, you've always had all the money. And you gave a boatload of money to a seller in exchange for a house. And that seller had a contract signed with a listing broker. And it was a marketing contract. So they agreed to pay that listing broker a marketing fee. So we're going to eliminate commission from it. The listing broker has always paid a marketing fee to the listing broker. The listing broker then took, not uncommon, half of it to compensate the buyer's broker. It was a way of marketing the property so that somebody brought a buyer who was motivated enough to buy the seller's home. So the reality is, if I'm talking to a buyer, you've always paid it. If I'm talking to a seller, you've always paid it. Guys, for us as real estate, the listing broker has always paid it. And that's if that's not been your mindset, guys, that's the mindset that we've got to have. And factually true. Okay, so that's important. We know that flow. By the way, if I'm talking with a seller, look, buyer gave you a boatload of money. You as a seller gave the money to a listing broker. The listing broker paid the compensation. The only thing that ever clouds how we really got paid was a closing statement. Because what does it show on a closing statement? Seller paid it. Shows it. Seller paid the listing broker, seller paid the buyer broker. I was in talking with a mortgage people yesterday, title people yesterday. I said, how are you guys going to handle it? They're not really certain yet. What I want you to know is what we're really being forced to do is practice pretty much the way that the commercial real estate agents have always been practicing. Because if the listing broker was paying it, they'd bill the listing broker. Listing broker would hand them a check. So both the mortgage people and the title people said, I really don't know. They don't know yet. Okay. So they're in a period of adjustment too. Is it all going to be handled? Yes. Now let's also do this. Where can we now get our compensation? Who from? Well, no, let's shift. Who have we always gotten our compensation? What was the first place we always get it from? 95% of the time plus. From a listing broker. Okay, the reality is our compensation, and everybody here, I'm using compensation. Our broker pays commissions, buyers and sellers don't. They pay a compensation. There's a shift, and this is to help everybody understand what's going on. So it's always been 95% of the time, basically count on, come from the listing broker. In the absence of a listing broker, where do we get it from? Let me give you a hint. FSBO. Where did you get it from? Seller. In the absence of that listing broker, who was responsible for seeing that you got paid? Not the, but the buyer. You figured out a way to be able to get compensated. But here's almost always. Now, I've never had any portion of compensation paid by a buyer. Yeah. But not enough that I even say it. But it's always been a listing broker, the seller. So what changes when Realcomp and then all the other MLSs follow? What changes? We're still going to have the ability to get it from the listing broker. And actually, let me put it this way. The buyer will still have the ability to compensate us by us getting it from the listing broker or from the seller.
Recording in progress.
So nothing's changed, right? There you got it. So the only thing you got to do is drop the volume on the TV. Pausing for a moment, guys. Yeah. Yeah, just take the TV volume. Just take the TV volume and turn it down. Okay, so that's what we're always going to focus on. And because of the change, that's what we'll have. Written agreement, it's got to specify the amount. Got to be specific. And oh, by the way, you can't take more than what the contract says. Now, I think we're all going to confess here to ourselves. We've probably never actually got the buyer representation contract when we should. We probably never disclosed in writing when we should. So now we're going to do all of that in advance. Buyer will know what their compensation is. So most of us have always got a buyer agency contract. Yeah, you sit down with a buyer today, get a contract signed, and do not, you hear me real close on this, do not leave the compensation blank. Do not put zero. If you leave it blank or you put zero, how much do you get paid? Zero. Hear me real clear. Zero. You can only collect the amount agreed upon in the contract. So if there was 4% offered, it doesn't matter. You get 3. If there was a bonus on top of 3, you only get 3. If you left it blank, you get 0.
Darwin,
Yes.
I thought we could amend that.
Yes. So I want you to catch, there's no sense in putting 0 in it, because what are you going to end up doing? Amending the contract. Could we, and this is, I think, where Renee's really going with her group, could we, if the bonus was offered, or it was 4%, we've agreed to 3. Otherwise, if more was offered, could we amend our buyer representation contract? And the answer is yes. The buyer would have to agree to you receiving that additional amount, because effectively, I want you to think, matter of fact, if this works, yes, it does. I can go to this. So here's our current buyer representation contract. By the way, we're good on all of our contracts. Everything was changed the first of the year. So if I put in here 3%, it then says credit. Buyer will receive a credit. Otherwise, any money that I get from the seller or the listing broker gets credited toward that. So let's say you got 4% from the listing broker by this contract. Who gets that additional money? Because now there's an overage. In me, it would go to the buyer, but the only way that you're going to do this is to get it clarified. Otherwise, negotiate the contract with you receiving 3%. It rightfully should be the buyer's money. Does that make sense? Okay. So we can amend this contract. If the buyer is agreeable to it, we just make that amendment, make sure that they sign. Everybody knows that we're getting more money than what we originally agreed to. It can be amended. So great question. Thanks for that clarification, Renee. All right. Let's go back to the presentation and just find out, is there anything else that we really need to hit? You know what? Let's do this. I think that's the key part, because it really does address most of what we've got. Now, let me come back with a share on one thing. Here. So this is a new form. We're dealing with the offer of compensation coming from the listing broker. Okay. So again, 3 spots for us to be able to get it: listing broker, seller, from the buyer. And wherever the buyer got it, as long as they're good with the mortgage company, doesn't matter. But in this case, what I'm showing you on screen is a cooperating broker compensation agreement. So, not advertised anywhere, there's no guarantee, and the only way that we're going to have any certainty of payment from the listing broker, because there's no agreement anywhere, we have to create it. So the form that you're looking at is coming from us. These are being submitted to the MLS today to be input to transaction test, to be input to RemindDocs Plus. All of your managers will have them. I believe it's in the OneDrive. And listen, it was Wednesday. I already had it. Chris went, yes. Overview, check. Oops, there's another thing. Hopefully we've got all of even the little clerical things taken care of. So it will be in the OneDrive. It will be available to you to use. How would I use this? I'm going to call up and I'm going to, hey, Mike, Darwin, over at. Wondering if you got compensation offered on. Yup. Great. I've got a showing that I'll set up for it. I'm going to send over a compensation agreement. If you would just sign that and send it back, that would be great. If we sell it, we get an acceptance, we get paid. That's the purpose of this. This is not written in such a way that we send it to someone on our listing. It's their responsibility. Now, we're going to act ethically. If we say we will, we will. If there's a change to whatever you said, you better make sure that it's in writing somewhere so that nobody comes back at us. But all other brokers should have something like this that they would send to us. In the absence of them having one, you can't use this because it's not written that way.
Darwin,
Something in that line that would work for us. Yes, sir.
uh, I think I heard you say that this was going to be put in Remind. Can you tell us when it's going to be put in Remind and will it be in the packages?
Our individual responsible, I sent it to her at about 11:30 with a final copy of it with everything set. Remind is, or Realcomp is pretty quick. So I would anticipate the next day or two at the longest. If it's in transaction desk, they're common for 3-4 weeks. So up until it appears into your MLS, just know that it's out there and it's available. Okay. Thanks for asking, Larry.
Darwin,
Yes.
is it,
Question?
this is Paula. So
Hi,
I have a
Paula.
question. I have a question. So, or maybe a comment. So if we're able to put a concession in the MLS, is that's visible for everyone to see? So when we make our call, we can basically say, I understand that you are offering a concession. Would you be willing to sign this agreement?
Well,
If I'm a buyer, if I'm a buyer.
let's
They-
talk big picture. Yes. Understanding what got us into that, I would not use that verbiage.
but they're saying we can use concession. You're saying
Yes, but
you
in
said
that
the
case,
MLS,
it is the seller offering the concession.
right? So what would so if I'm a buyer's agent, what am I supposed to say?
I wouldn't say anything
You said we call
because
them
what
and
you
say-
see is a concession and it's 3%. That concession can be used for anything for this, for the most part, because that's all it's going to say is seller offering concession. Yes, it'll probably, I can tell you, Realcomp will have a blank for dollars or the blank percent of purchase price,
So
but
earlier
it's not
you said-
earmarked for anything.
So earlier you said, and that's where I'm confused. Why can we
Okay.
call the commission in one end and not the other? And earlier you said we should call them and ask them, are you, I'm confused. What are we supposed to call them and say then? This is confusing.
So Paula, thank you for being open like this. And by the way, this is the type of forum that I want to have today. So with us as a group here and everybody online, just jump in. This is where we have to use the proper verbiage because I will share with you, there's a concern that in putting concessions in, all of us, I'm even trying to say this right. Concessions are to be used toward closing costs. Points to buy down an interest rate. That money to be applied toward closing costs, any of the buyer's closing costs. Taxes are good, prepaids, whatever a lender would allow. Well, would a lender allow a seller to pay the buyer broker's fee? Yep. So what I'm telling you is we don't even need to clarify it. They just said, hey, we'll give 3%. If the buyer and you, and working and counseling the buyer, decide to use that 3% as part of the offer, well, they can make it for whatever they want. Now, here's what we do know. Mortgage companies want us to put it if it is specifically for the buyer broker fee. Okay? Because here's the other part we know. All lending programs, and we'll say all. I saw something with Mishta that came out that, look, work with your lender. But for the most part, they'll let you do your 3% for closing costs, and then they'll let you do your 3% for a buyer broker's fee. You can't put 6% and leave it. It's got to be 3% for the closing costs and then specifically 3% for the buyer broker fee. So we're going to separate those out. So bottom line is, I see a listing and the listing says that the seller is offering 3% in concession. Do I need to use that? As a buyer, do I need that? What if I don't need it? What am I going to do? Make an offer. Am I going to take that into consideration that the seller is going to save 3% because I haven't earmarked it? I haven't said I need 3% concessions. So it's an offer. It doesn't needs to be used. Today's market, you just offered 3% more than the other competing offers. If you don't use it. So you see, we're all old enough, many of us. Some of you aren't, but you'll get it.
Hey,
Ragu.
Hey,
Darwin?
Hold for just a second. Let me get the ragu out here.
Okay.
For those who remember Get Ragu, do you remember their tagline? They talked about all the good stuff. It's in there.
It's in there.
If there's something that was supposed to be in that spaghetti sauce, it was in there. When it comes to your compensation for both the listing broker and the seller broker, it's like ragu. It's in there. So if we really clarify, it's the transaction. Compensation, build it into the transaction. We just got to state somehow how it's going to work. Okay. So that's just a key again to understanding to help on that. Who's going to jump in
Hey,
there first? I see Luigi, you're on my screen.
Hey, Darwin. Yeah, I wanted to bring to your attention, actually, I think after you came on a call, this email just came from Realcomp. And it says as this, I'm going to quote, as a condition of the recent NAR settlement that was entered into on behalf of MLS throughout the country, MLS subscribers must disclose to prospective sellers and buyers the following disclaimer. I'm going to quote, broker compensation is not set by law and is fully negotiable. End of quote. And it continues then with their message. This statement must be included in conspicuous language as part of any listing agreement, buyer written agreement, and pre-closing disclosure documents, if any. So I just wanted to bring to everyone's attention this newest email from
guys, and this is what I'm saying. As far as the paperwork, we're good right now. This is the buyer broker contract. There's that verbiage. Now, I also know that right now, our listing contract doesn't have it. But we've got a little bit of time because that doesn't have to be in compliance until August 17th. But what we need today, we're compliant and that verbiage is in our agreements. Okay, so nothing for you to be able to worry about. The updated exclusive right to represent listing contract, ready to go, but we're waiting for NAR, MAR, and the local MLSs to see what they're going to produce in regard to any contract before we do any final update. But that verbiage will be on there, but we're still good all the way through August 17th. Okay. Thank you, Leach, for jumping in on that. Was somebody else in there? Kevin, I think you had a question there for a bit.
I do. So I just want to make sure I'm clear. So they can put in the 3% in commission or in concession, but some of the lenders only allow 3% as a concession as part of the mortgage. So if they're using it for that, do we lose the flexibility of using the concession for say something that showed up during the inspection part of the process? Or
I would say yes, which is not a change, by the way, because if you used all 3% of it toward closing costs, tax, prepaid, you're either going to have the seller making the repairs or you're going to accept it because you couldn't add anything else to the closing costs because you already had that total built in. Yeah, the other is, thank you. The other, Kevin, is you could adjust the price down and get the credit that way.
okay,
Of course,
so it's still the concession is still a total of 3%, but we just have to spell out what we're using it for.
Oh, let me clarify a little bit further. So, Kevin, you got Let's take it closing costs as we've always identified them as 3%. And
Okay,
that was the cap. They're allowing another 3% if the buyer needs to get compensation offered or paid by the seller. So now you're gonna have 3% toward closing cost taxes prepaids. Use the clause that's in the MLS,
okay.
and then 3% toward buyer broker's fee. Okay?
So there is
And
enough
I'll hit
to
that
get
in a
the additional
second.
3% if we need it.
That 3% additional is available if you need it, yes.
Got it. Okay.
But they need to be earmarked separately.
Okay.
Except, yeah, did I give you the simplified version to it? Yeah. By the way, just real simple right now, I would put it this way. Here's what you're gonna say, because let's shift. We went away from asking the listing broker to pay it and using this form. And the buyer decided that they'd rather just put it in as part of their purchase agreement. The buyer's going to request that the seller pay the compensation. Okay, nothing changed. This is something we could always have done. Always could have done this, okay? Then it's really simple. If it's the buyer requesting it and they're requesting the seller to pay it or provide compensation for or a contribution toward, then who needs to agree upon it? The buyer and the seller. The buyer is making an agreement, an offer to the seller. So where is it going to go? Additional conditions. So if you think concessions, as we've always done it before, we'd go to the additional conditions on the purchase agreement. And we would put seller to contribute 3% of the purchase price to be applied toward buyer's closing costs, taxes, prepaids, any other additional or allowable expense. What will you put now? Seller to contribute 3% of the purchase price to be applied toward buyer's broker fee or compensation.
So any commission negotiation should not be on the purchase agreement, that it needs to be on a separate.
You're so good. So here's one that has come out and it's interesting. I wish Mark were here because Mark was the one that went, no, Darwin. Is he? No, not that Mark. Our other Mark. I'm going, because Mark's lost a lot of weight and a whole lot better looking now than Mark. I'm just picking on you, buddy, if you're here. So I'm sitting at Sterling Heights office of AAA North, and we're reviewing purchase agreements. And we're talking about, I'll catch everybody up, that the way that all of us understood it is we could not negotiate our compensation as part of the purchase agreement. Well, that's true. We can't. But the buyer and seller can. So and this is where it's like, you almost got to go, what? So you clear your mind for a second. We have to forget, really we'll use, as of today, we have to forget the way that we've done business. Because we never really looked at the buyer, as I put it, I've always done this. Buyer, you're responsible to see that I get paid 3%. Anything I get from the seller's broker gets credited toward that. So basically, you should never have to pull any money out of your pocket other than that $395. That's the way I always handled it, right? So I was preparing them. Well, now it's very specifically. There is a compensation that the seller pays and a compensation that the buyer pays. But the buyer is still responsible for seeing you get paid. Any money that you were get from the seller or the seller's broker gets credited toward that amount. Nothing's changed other than we've got to learn how to, present that and present it comfortably and confidently, and that, we were talking, we earn our money. So if the buyer's responsible for seeing that we get paid, they could really dictate to us whether or not they want us to use this cooperating broker compensation, getting it from the listing broker, or whether or not they'll take care of it through the purchase agreement because it's their choice. Key is this: what we do as real estate agents then is to work with the buyer and consult them. You owe me 3%. Here's the ways that you can pay me. I'm going to assume you don't want to pull it out of your pocket, do you? No. Well, then, the way we've always done is to be able to collect compensation directly from the listing broker. But we could also have you build it directly into your purchase agreement as part of the negotiations and get it from the seller. Oh. When we keep it simple, by the way, now it's normal. And it's hard for them to raise any questions because they know you guys have always been compensated. We're still going to be compensated. The big word right now is transparency. Even in the media, everything is transparency. Be transparent. So we always could have, but it's the buyer who's actually putting it as part of their agreement, because as part of what their expenses are, they could elect to ask the seller to pay them. Okay? Everybody good with that part? Cool. How about out in Zoom land? There's not
Hey,
anybody.
Darwin.
Yes, Renee.
So just curious what your thoughts are. What if when you're sitting down with a seller, you have them sign a notice of buyer agency right then? And then when people try and set appointments on your listing, you just automatically send that to them. So you're not having 5,000 phone calls.
Almost like, could we have, I think I understand. So here's what we can't use is the agreement that I just had up, the broker, because that's us requesting it from the other.
No, it's the
There's
buyer,
a-
or
matter
it's
of
the buyer
fact, if I-
agency.
Yeah, if, one of the things that's come up is, could we, in the email upon a confirmation of showing, put in there a statement as to the amount of compensation? Is that kind of what you were leading to?
No. When you're
No?
sitting down with a seller and you're filling out paperwork
Yep.
to list their home,
Okay,
having them sign a notice of buyer agency right then. So that when someone makes an appointment on your home to show your listing, you can email it to that agent right then. So you're not fielding phone calls and emails and everything else. They already know they're getting paid.
yeah, I'm gonna say that typically we're gonna, I think I understand, Renee. When should we find out whether or not there's compensation offered? Well, yeah, almost before we show the house. From an
Right,
aspect of
so
us
when the listing
showing,
request, the showing request comes in, I'm automatically sending it. So
notify,
they
yeah,
know instead of my
So-
phone blowing up.
yeah, so it would kind of be in most offices that have it set to where there's, an email that goes out upon the confirmation of the appointment, where the disclosures are sent so that they have them whether or not they're a participant of the MLS and it's posted or not. And the question is, could we put it in there?
No,
A
that's not the
statement.
question. Nope.
But you want to
If-
notify them upon confirmation that compensation is being offered.
Yes, but it would not be through showing time, like how they send documents.
So, well, here, let me throw this out, because that is something we've been talking about. I think we're basically in the same thing. It's how do we notify somebody who wants to show the property that compensation is offered? Is that a fair simplification? So.
We can talk about it offline because I think we're talking
Yeah.
about two different
I
things.
think I know, but it's
listen,
really just a matter of how can we
I say
notify somebody who's,
something? Can I say something?
are we
I
still
think
on
that when
topic
she
with this?
sends that, yes,
Okay, go ahead, Lydia.
when she sends that out, that is because somebody has made an appointment, but they still
Correct.
don't know that there's compensation. It would mean that they would still have to call her before they make the appointment.
No, it would
Well,
be signed
again,
by
this
my
is-
seller stating that they're paying 3%.
But how would you know to send it out to somebody if they have not called you to see if there's compensation? You're saying they only get it once they make the appointment.
Right. You need to
But we're
know that you're
saying-
compensated before you're showing the home
Got it. But people usually will call you before they make an appointment to make sure there's compensation.
Right, but if you're a listing agent and you have 10, 15, 20 listings, I don't want 100 phone calls.
Yeah, yep.
I'm just trying to make it simpler.
Yeah, so what I just put up is the exclusive listing contract. And we know that we've already covered it, that here's the amount of compensation total and the seller's authorizing us to offer 3% to a buyer's agent and a transaction coordinator. Again, we really don't want to offer sub-agency. If you haven't heard that before, we can discuss that at a different time as to why we don't, but we're not going to exclude a seller from doing it if they're extremely knowledgeable and think that they do know and understand, and they insist on it. We're not going to lose a listing by saying, no, we're not going to do it. Okay. But basically it's 3% to a buyer's agent or transaction coordinator. How can we communicate that to somebody who's set up a showing? And I'm saying that's what we're still investigating. And a part of that could be a notification potentially through showing time. And I can I can only leave it at that because there's no known. What I can say is it's not an aggregate source where it's posted and anybody can go and see. We can only do that on our personal websites and the company websites. Now, I'll share with you some good news. Our company, Coldwell Banker, Century 21, through working with Moxie, will set it up to where we can input the amount of buyer broker compensation that we'll post on our individual websites and on the company websites. Now, that means blue is separate from gold. They won't be able to be on the same. And this is just where it gets into some technicalities as to how we're structured. But here's clearly, Century 21 Town and Country will have all of them on the Century 21 Town and Country website. AAA North will have it on theirs. Okay. So it will be out there. People can find it that way. All right. It's just, and I think Renee, I got you. And this has been the big question. If you're a listing agent, you don't want constant questions. How much are you offering for compensation? So if there's an easier way for us to notify agents, we'll find that. And it could be potentially through showing time, but again, we're working on what we're allowed to do regarding that one. So great question there.
Darwin?
Others?
Darwin, couldn't we on the agent remarks say visit my website for more details?
Aggregate, because now you've just stated you're going to find it in the MLS. That statement by itself is not allowed. You can't direct them through the MLS. So your comments in the MLS, even though it's on a separate site, they're not supposed to be there. You can't, by the way, you can't put if I had a sign behind me that you could see and it just said 3.0, and that was one of the pictures, that'll get you in trouble. Put a memo or a magnet on the refrigerator, 3.0. Nope. If it's in the MLS, any allusion to, not allowed.
But
Which
isn't
is
our,
kind of
isn't our
surprising why they allow
website
the
and stuff
concessions.
already, isn't our website and our personal information, our personal websites already included in the MLS when you click on the listing agent?
Yes, but it's not alluding, Kevin, to the buyer broker compensation.
Okay. So it could become a normal practice, but people haven't talked about that enough yet offline.
It will be normal for it to be posted on your website, but you're not going to allude to it in the MLS.
Got it.
If you're trying to find a way to tell somebody what it is in the MLS and any source, I'm going to say any source of it, not going to fly. So the only reason that potentially the showing time is because it's a separate surface owned by somebody different and it's not posted. And that's why I'm just going, right now, guys, it's potential that we could notify somebody who's now set an appointment as to what, if any, is offered. Now, let me throw something out to you because we're all focused on getting compensation from the listing broker. I'm planting a seed because I've talked to a lot of you. Many things have come up, many different thoughts, and it's gone, where can we get our compensation? The listing broker or the seller? What might be the easiest way? The seller. No, it doesn't matter. I don't have to get anything signed. The buyer's doing it. Because see, the buyer's the one who wants to make sure that I get paid. I want to make sure that the buyer knows how I can get paid. So if I'm sitting down as consultation with the buyer, I can say, buyer's a couple of ways that I can get compensated. One of them is the way that we've always done it, is building it through the listing broker. But sometimes I can't hear from the listing broker to know if they're even going to pay it or get a contract signed that they will pay it. Therefore, it might be easier for us to just look at you building it right into the transaction as part of your purchase agreement. What do you guys think about that? And you want to know what else it does? It shifts everything specifically to the buyer. No longer is the listing broker involved, which takes it away from what brought in this suit anyway. So I'm planting a seed because either one of them is going to work just fine. And if a mortgage company is involved, frankly, it might be better that the buyer is building it into the transaction, asking the seller to pay it. Seed planted. There's going to be more to go as we figure it out. And I'll be talking with all of you, and I want to know how you're doing it. But I want you to think about that. And when I hear the silence, that tells me I got the wheels turning, because you wouldn't need the form at that point. Oh, by the way, let me throw this out to you. Let's call, I call Schmuck over at Schmo's Realty. Schmuck, you offering compensation? Yeah, great. I'm going to show it. I show it tonight. I send him the form, asking him to sign it. Would I do that? Yeah. Buyer goes, ooh, I love the house. Great. Let's get it written up. I write up the purchase agreement. I still don't have the cooperating broker compensation agreement back yet. Am I going to submit the offer? No, because there's no guarantee I'm going to get paid. Unless I just write it in. One more issue avoided. It just,
So, but
I don't have
Darwin,
it. In that case, I would just have the buyer write it in because I didn't get that back. And that's potential for a lot. Because, I mean, like what Renee was just talking about, Renee's a great busy agent, and on top of it, she was one of our great managers in the Lapeer office. She's busy. How easy is, as great as she is, how easy is it going to be for her to sign that a document stating, yeah, I'm going to pay you 3%. So even the best will have trouble getting all of those back.
so Darwin,
again, just one more reason. Yeah, go ahead, Lydia.
what did you call Schmuck?
The listing broker, Schmuck over at Schmuck Realty.
Why did you call him?
Why did I call him? Find out if he was offering compensation.
Why?
That's my point. You're asking why? I
Yeah,
really
because
don't,
we just
I
had,
really
we just
don't
had a
need to, but I will
conversation.
throw this.
We
Go
just had
ahead.
a conversation with Renee where she didn't want to take the phone calls. She only
Correct.
wanted to send something else. So now you're saying, let me give you an example. I called Schmuck and I said to him, are you offering compensation?
Right?
We're back to the same conversation.
Yeah. Oh, I'm not saying it won't happen, but when it's my example as to why Renee brought up what she did, because these agents won't want to know. Now, let me throw this out. Should we know if there's any compensation offered to a buyer broker?
Yes.
I'm going
And
to
we
tell you
have
that
to
I
know by
believe yes.
calling.
Who's that important
Even
to?
if you're making a phone call, you're not getting it writing.
Yeah,
Take away a step and make it more simple.
Yeah, the key, guys, is that one, we need to know. I'm going to say we need to know. Who needs to know? The buyer. Because they're formulating an offer. They need to know where the seller's at. See, there's a difference between as a seller, I've created a price and I'm offering 3%. And there's an offer of sale and there is no 3%. There's a difference. So I believe that's information that we should have as part of our due diligence, fiduciary responsibility, that we know. As much as I don't like it, I'd rather not know, but the buyer needs to know. So I've got to find out whether it's a phone call or it was sent to me in an email, automatic, however we get it. If it's posted on a website, however we get it, we should know that because I believe that's information that the buyer deserves to have. Okay. So then it's a matter of how do I guarantee? That's my point. See, if it's through the listing broker, we need a compensation agreement. Might it be easier for us to just have the buyer build it into the purchase agreement because of that scenario? So that's where I want to have you think about that full discussion that we've gone through, because it's all of those things that we just looked at, that it may be easier to just build it into the purchase agreement. But it's the buyer, because you've consulted them and they said, yeah, let's do it that way. All right. Let's see. I think Martha, I saw your hand up there first.
Okay, so the MLS is going to show that the seller is offering concessions or not, and the amount as a percentage. Is that sufficient that we don't really need to call the listing broker to find out if they're offering compensation?
That's a great question. Let me ask you, has anybody ever made an offer on a property? And I need you to forget about today's market and the competitive situation. But have you ever made an offer and appliances were offered, but in the end, not included? We all have or will have that scenario. I had one, and it was a point of negotiation, probably 2 or 3 times back and forth, appliances on the purchase agreement. To my seller on a $240,000 house, those appliances were $7,000 that they just put out of pocket. We then got an offer, no appliances. It was just a little bit less. And my presentation to the seller was, look, same people, they're back, but there's a key difference in this offer. They went a little bit more or a little bit less here, but they wiped out all those appliances. My seller says, I'm good. We closed, had 2-day possession. Buyer's agent calls me up and says, Darwin, we're over at the house. I said, great, how's it look? They said, well, fabulous, other than there's no appliances. I said, well, yeah. She says, well, they were included. I said, no, that was the reason my sellers took your last offer, is because you didn't have appliances on the purchase agreement. Now, what did she do? Well, they were in the MLS. Yep. And our price was also a whole lot higher than what we agreed to. If you want, I might be able to get them to ship them back if you want to pay that additional $8,000. Well, I don't want to do that, but you had them on disclosures. Doesn't matter. Read the verbiage on there. It specifically says that the appliances are only included if on the purchase agreement. So my bottom line is, we can offer anything, but the purchase agreement is what's going to dictate. So even though concessions were offered, it would have to be specified on the purchase agreement what they were for. Was it for closing costs or was it for buyer broker fee? But it would have to be specified on there. That's a great question. Great question. Alice, I can see you got your hand up there.
Can you hear me?
Sure can, Alice.
Okay, my question is not regarding the contractual guarantees. Can we put on our signs buyer agent friendly? I know we have to do the contractual things. There are
Well,
signs.
to guarantee payment, we need an agreement
Of
contractually.
course.
from an aspect of promoting,
Yes. I know we need an agreement. I know we need contractual guarantees. I just
can-
want to know if I can put on the sign buyer agent friendly.
I'm going to say yes.
Thank you.
It's very general, it's agent specific. It's not being advertised out to all agents in an aggregated source. I would have to say, yeah, that would be one, because what's the difference between putting it on a sign or putting it on your personal website or the company website?
Okay, then,
I think, Alice, that would be doable. If
okay,
you do
and
it, just
then
let
we'll
us
make
know.
sure the
and
picture to the MLS doesn't include it.
Correct, yeah. Matter of fact, they won't allow it in if it has a sign in the front yard
Right.
anyway. So, yeah, but it's definitely a key point, Alice, a great one.
Thank you.
Absolutely. You bet. Who else has got something out there for us? Yeah, James, go ahead. I almost feel it's like, hi,
Yeah,
my
Darwin.
name's James, long
yeah,
time listener,
Darwin.
first time question for you. Go
Darwin,
ahead, buddy.
you there? Yeah, just a couple of questions. If we weren't able to find out from the agent what they're offering out, or if they're offering out anything, and we built the compensation into the PA, the buyer asked for it, send it over, find out the agent says, hey, we're offering out compensation. I mean, they'd have to do a counter offer, change what, I'm saying, where would you go with that? So we don't know what it is. We're just going to build it in, but they already have a contract to offer out 3%. We find that out after we send it over. I mean, is that a negotiation thing at that point?
Well, I'm not dealing with that contract. Right? I'm not dealing with their listing contract or what they did. I'm not interfering with the compensation that the listing broker has agreed upon. It is my buyer negotiating with their seller. And that's where the key is at. This is the buyer doing this, not us. And again, this is that point of a mental separation from where we were yesterday to where we are today. That now the buyer knows specifically they're responsible. There's three ways for them to us to pay it out of their own pocket from listing broker or the seller. Out of those, what do you want to do, buyer? And they tell us.
But the seller's not going to want to give let's say 6% total to their agent, assuming 3%
They wouldn't be.
is going out, and now they're also going to be giving 3% directly to this buyer.
Well,
I mean,
no.
The seller's not going to want to do that.
I got you. So, Jim, this is a great one to look at. Everybody's agreement is going to look similar to ours that's on the screen here. So if we all have this, here's what we know. They only get 3%. If there's a seller who doesn't get that, well, wait a minute. And the question will come up. It's got to. Wait a minute. The buyer's asked me to pay the 3, but I've already offered to give you 6. What is the listing broker going to do? Or should they do? Take the 3% that they were going to get in the first place. Maybe what we have to do is, and again, this has come up, it's been in my head because there's been circumstances that people have brought forward to me, and I went, oh my gosh, your seller was actually committed to pay 9% because of the way that something was written. So maybe, Jim, what we would have to do is, as part of the seller to contribute 3% to be applied toward buyer broker's fee, maybe there has to be a separate statement somewhere that says buyer's broker rejecting any offer of compensation from the listing broker. It just, in the past, that's something we should have done and we never did. Because I've seen a couple of purchase agreements where literally a seller was committed to pay 9%, and thankfully it was on our side. We didn't have to do it. Does that kind of help?
Yeah, well, that's what I'm getting at is the
Yeah.
seller's not gonna wanna do 9% because we didn't know they were offering out, couldn't
Hey,
find it
gang, so
out.
let me be real clear with our group. If that happens on one of our listings, get the doggone offer accepted. Seller, I'll only, because they're asking you to pay it, I'm only gonna do 3%. Come up with some signed agreement, says we're only doing 3 instead of the 6, and we're not offering 3% out because the 3% that we were offering out is being paid by you directly to the buyer.
For
Okay?
that,
It-
for
it-
that offer.
Yes, just
Yeah.
for that offer, because that's what we are negotiating on at that point.
Yeah.
Yep, absolutely.
And then I have one
Gotcha.
more question. Did you say earlier that we don't have to use the cooperating broker compensation agreement within our brokerage? So I bring an offer to present it to another agent in our office who's a designated agent for them. What do we do among each other or anyone under the HRC umbrella?
Have you ever met Martha Snyder? I wouldn't trust her. No, what I would say though, Jim, by the way, Jim is known as James also, but I would still get it. Get it in writing so that it's part of the file. It could become important if a mortgage company is involved because they want to know that the buyer's responsibilities have been covered. In talking with them, they said, well, look, if it's coming from the listing broker, we probably don't need to know about it. But the key word was probably don't. So a lot of that is left to be seen yet, but I would still get that, even if it's within our company. Okay. Good question there. I like that one. Trying to think. I thought of one other one that came up and it slipped my mind. Anybody else got questions out there?
Yeah, me.
I got one in here. I like it. So the question is there any way for us to market that we're offering a buyer broker compensation in social media, and so on? The answer is yes, you can do that. And it's, again, it's just like it being posted on your personal website. So it's not an aggregated source where somebody can go and find in one spot what all of those are. Now, the closest that they can come with us is our Century 21 family of companies. Century 20, it can't be on century21.com. So Blue, it cannot be on coldwellbanker.com. It won't be on those. It can only be within the company websites and our personal websites as agents.
But is the bank at you connected to the MLS?
There is some way the where it's set. So Michael was just asking about what about the back at you? But back at you would only be if it was automatically placing it. But if I just post it to social media not using back at you, then it's not tied through an IDX. So I can post on my Facebook page this listing. I might even, and again, these are the little things that we'll find out. Could I post to my website through back at you that we're offering 3% on 123 Easy Street? I think so. Because I just use that as a source to upload to my Facebook page, to my Instagram, to my Twitter. So based on
Darwin,
what I know, I'm going to say yes. Go ahead, Holly.
I'm a little confused about that. So if we make a flyer for like our open house, can we put on the flyer for the open house to put on our social media that we are offering 3%?
Yes.
Okay.
It's not an aggregate source. Yeah. I've really looked into it. Now, I'm not an attorney, and we all know that, but you know, I'm talking with Chris is talking with attorneys and board people and people throughout the United States. So with what we have, the answer is you should be able to do that without a problem because it's not an aggregated source. It's your personal business that you're doing and you're promoting. So it should be fine.
I have a question, statement. So I just took a listing and I put 3% to a buyer's agent. And so after this conversation, I called Kelly and told her to remove it, and it won't let her remove it.
Yeah, no problem, because as of tomorrow, it's just gonna be gone.
Okay,
So Realcomp is just, those 3 fields will drop out. So whatever we've had, it's gone, but our contract with the sellers already exists, allowing us to still offer the compensation as we've done it. It's just no longer going to be advertised in the MLS. Another great one.
got it. So going forward, when we sit down with the seller, we're still going to negotiate for a commission of approximately 6%. But wouldn't it make sense then to give that to the buyer's agent, to the buyer when the contract comes in, given that we're getting 6%? No, or are we going to now negotiate for 3% paid to the listing agent?
Yeah. No, you're still going to do exactly what you've been doing. So we've been asking for 6%, asking and advising by the seller to offer 3% out. We're still doing that. No contract is going to change toward that. So we believe that that's still the best way to market the property and to net the seller the most money. Okay, so that's a good one. I got to plug in here, guys. Did that make sense, Lydia?
I thought it was my computer that was running slow. I was going to run downstairs and plug it in.
No, that was mine. I have it separated. There's enough distance here that I didn't want to trip over it, and you guys hope that I was all right because I'm so youthful at my age. Something like that anyway. I got to think, it seems like there was one other one that people have been asking, and I'm gonna throw this out because some of you still have a lot of concerns about what I can only foresee may come up. And that is, there's a lot of concern about agents that are now suddenly going to start being weak and taking listings at a lower commission or compensation, and that there will be a lot of stupid sellers. Now, let me rephrase that. A lot of ignorant sellers because of weak agents who don't have the verbal judo to explain why you should offer compensation. But I want to throw this out. And this is, I need you to open your mind. And again, remember, the mind is like a parachute. It works best when it's open. So just let it open. When it comes to the knowledge of all of these agents, the knowledge and exposure to the agents, to the consumer, to the sellers, what changes today or tomorrow? My book, ain't nothing changed. So here's what I want you to say. Hakuna Matata. It's our worry-free philosophy. Hakuna Matata. Guys, all of that crap should have already been going on. Because the consumers already know, sellers already know. Wait a minute, I never had to, no. So they've known that since the first of the year. All of these brokers and all these agents have known it since the first of the year. I believe most of that should have already happened if it was going to. Why wouldn't it? Why would it all of a sudden be the magic date and then all of a sudden everybody changes their mode of doing business? I can't see it. Will there be a few? The answer is yes. Are there a few out there already know? Yeah. If you're in the north, if they're the northeast, we know people who have already been doing it. They've been doing it before the first of the year. So bottom line, guys, is know it well enough that you can explain it. Treat it as normal because it really is. Only 2 things have changed. No longer advertised in the MLS. We got to have a signed contract with the buyer specifying how and how much we get paid before we show a home. I'll throw one other thing out because I want you to treat it this way, and then Martha, I'll come back to you. Since you've been licensed, or since 1995, I'll put it in there for those that have been at it for a long time. Think of disclosure, agency disclosure. At what point are we supposed to disclose our agency relationship to the party that we're having communication with? Some of you have been with me before and you're getting into the aspect. These are my words, but I think it makes the most sense of what the reality of the law says is that you must disclose prior to the exchange of any confidential information. Now, how many of us have ever done that? And many of you, I could say even once. It's like, oops, don't say anything. You need to know that I represent the seller. Have we even done that?
I have.
Oh, who was that?
Helen Glandon.
Oh, Helen. God bless you. It would be you.
Because I'm so
So Helen, you're close, but now let me ask you this. And after you went, oop, don't say anything. I need you to sign this. How many of us have ever done that? Even once? Because what do we, by the way, I was just working with somebody yesterday. It was like, oh no, I do. I said, oh, wait a minute. I call you up and I say, hey, agent, I want to list my house. What do you automatically start doing? You start asking questions. And as soon as you start asking questions, might you get confidential information?
Yes.
And how do you even, you can't. So guys, what I'm saying that I can't say, we need to do the right thing because we know what these rules are that we've agreed to. Follow the rules. That'll be the key. Okay. Martha, still got that question, thought?
I haven't checked, and I usually try to answer my questions before I ask them. So forgive me for that.
No problem.
Are the clauses that are recommended for asking for buyer agent compensation in our transaction desk clauses?
There's one in there right now, Martha, but I will tell you for the blue, I am going to update that because I'm simplifying it further because I realized it was really wordy. And what we don't know is specifically how it will be taken care of, what title company, escrow companies are going to require on how it be handled. Even the aspect of a line item. Is it going to show that if we get compensation from the listing broker, is it going to show that the listing broker got the full compensation and then they write us a check? I mean, a physical check. I don't know. Nobody really knows how that exactly will be handled. So we need to write it in such a way that we're guaranteed to get compensated, but generic enough that it leaves it open for how title companies and mortgage companies will want that. But the basics to it is that it will say seller to contribute 3% of the purchase price to be applied toward buyer broker's fee. That way it meets, we know it meets the necessary parts of what the mortgage community will require.
Hey,
And I'll have that updated here.
Darwin,
Perfect. Don't let
does
me
that
leave without
include
doing it.
like the Freddie Mac properties? Because I know Freddie Mac only offers 2.5%. So we can always put that in there for them.
Yeah, my understanding is Freddie Mac, Fannie Mae, FHA, VA, even Farm Home or the rural development, all are allowing 3% for the buyer broker's compensation. But it has to be earmarked specifically for, they want those separate. So our standard closing costs that we're used to, they will allow on top of whatever they were. So even in whichever one was 6%, so if FHA was 6%, they are now allowing it to be 9%, but it's got to be 6% as we've always done it, and 3% to be applied toward brokers, buyers brokers compensation. Good. Very cool. We got to get getting down to the end of it here. But again, this was today's the day, basically, because tomorrow when you wake up and everything changes, everything, all two things, right? So keep it simple, guys. I'm out there. If you've got questions, let me know. I'm going to scan real quick here, the chat room. Has anybody been monitoring? Martha, you're pretty good. Was there anything in that chat room that I needed to address, or did we hit all of them? Okay, so yeah, David, I see yours. That is actually already in the Century 21 Town and Country clauses. And by the way, if you happen to be an agent who's part of, well, no, in the MLS, all of them have clauses. My recommendation is click on the clauses and drop it into the additional conditions or onto the purchaser or onto an addendum, so that you're not creating your own and potentially leaving something out. So that clause that I've been talking about has been added to it. Oh, come on, work for me.
Darwin, Ahmed says, is another agreement to work with buyer other than the exclusive buyer agency?
So let me say, I'm going to put it this way. If I don't want to work with somebody who won't pay me, I don't want to show a house where I go show it and then they could go to the listing broker or to their best friend that they graduated with from high school, or a really busy agent who just said, yeah, go ahead, use Michael. He'll be okay with it. Because again, if we don't have a contract, we don't get paid. So I can go show a property, and if I don't get a contract signed prior to, or I put that I'm a touring agent providing only touring services, that I get nothing, then go anywhere else. So I think what we would do for the simplistic part of it now, for somebody who says, look, can I just, and I quote what so many, just show me the damn house. I just want to see the damn house. Okay. Well, then great. If I show it to you, would you be willing to compensate me? If the answer is yes, then give me a one-day contract that if you buy this house, I get paid. Because we have a protection clause on there, right? 180 days, 6 months. They can't go back and buy that house from anybody else. I get paid. So just set your contract up to address it that way. If they won't pay you, I hate to say it, I wouldn't show it. Now, this literally just popped into my head. If that was Michael's listing and they just went, no, I'm not going to sign a contract. I won't sign anything. You're going to pay me. Then I'll say, okay, I'll tell you what. I'm going to have the listing agent call you. What am I going to ask for from Michael? A referral fee. And I don't think there's any of us that wouldn't pay it. Because why lose the buyer completely? If they actually do and he wants to go out and show it, he doesn't need to have them sign a contract because he's the listing agent representing the seller. Okay, they were smart enough to realize that we can't force somebody to be a dual agent. So that would be that scenario. And literally I just thought about it. And that's why I say these things just keep popping up the more that we talk. So that was a great question. Do we have others in there, Martha? Because I can't get mine to scroll for me.
Can the cooperating broker compensation agreement be included in the listing docs, or does this go against the settlement agreement?
The answer is no and yes. No, it cannot. Yes, it goes against what the settlement agreement is.
Does it make sense to put the company website URL in our email signature line?
Better yet is your own personal website. So mine's darwinconley.com. I'd rather them go there than, sorry, Chris. I'd rather them go to my personal website than the company website because now it's absolutely my lead. I am for certain going to get it. If I put in the company website, and if you don't have your own, I should look here. If you don't have your own, shame on you guys. Get that to happen and make sure that you get a hold of Bob and Jay. Because guys, we've got two outstanding software apps that you can take advantage of. Back at U Media and Moxie. And what's it cost to get your own domain name if you don't have that? You absolutely positively should have that. Because that's how you're going to promote and get the business to you. It's lead generation to yourself. Make a lot more money. Absolutely. Any others?
Last question, am I able to collect a 3% commission and a retaining fee?
Man, if you're good, as the current buyer representation contract is posted, how's it written? I got to tell you, I really don't remember. Now, as our compensation is written here with the buyer, no retainer fee is an option on it. And I'll tell you that when we first put these out, there was a retainer fee. Then it was like, we shouldn't have a retainer fee. So, yeah, that's the exclusive. Let's see, buyer. Yeah, I think there were now this is the latest one. I didn't pull this down from what's in the MLS. There's a question whether or not we'll have the retainer fee and all the other stuff left out in there. The very rare that anybody has actually offered or said, you owe me a retainer fee. We have enough trouble getting people to make a commitment to pay me 3%, let alone saying, give me $1,000 up front. Now, by the way, does that make sense? Yeah. Right, and it gets credited toward your overall compensation. But I think that's one to be left is whether or not it will stay on or whether or not it may look more toward this. Great question with that one too. Thank you for pulling it out. So Martha, that's it for us? All right. And okay. Anybody else got to jump in, take yourself off mute? Otherwise, we're going to call it good here at, what did we take? I didn't even look at my watch. Holy shnikes.
Hi, Darwin. This was a
Yes.
great call. Thank you.
Well, thank you.
Very good.
Thank you. Well, it was just, you know, it was the aspect, let's just have an open forum. And you guys participated wonderfully because it's really tough in Zoom to get people to jump in and hold on. And that's why I'm going, holy cow, it's 1:28. So you guys have been wonderful. And Lydia, thank you. Lydia was one of my first students, by the way. It was 1993, wasn't it, Lydia?
Before. It was
1994.
Yeah.
All right.
Hey,
So it was just
Darwin.
interesting because she says, do you remember me?
And he
said,
said
"I should."
no.
No. But how do I forget that voice? So anyway, and you know, I changed a little bit too. So anyway, guys, it's been
Hey,
a lot of
Darwin,
fun. Thank you.
Darwin.
Yes,
Hey,
go
don't
ahead.
away. It looks like Alice Smith has her hand raised, or maybe that's from earlier.
Alice, are you set? Because I know your hand never
I'm
seemed
set.
to go down after. You're
You
all
answer-
set.
Yeah. Thank you.
Awesome. All right, gang. Well, I see everybody else is leaving. Thank you for hanging out. It's been a lot of fun. We wrap up a very special edition of Hot Topic Tuesday. So we'll see y'all. Have a great one.